Hello everyone. Thank you so very much for coming to hear about this important topic about human trafficking tonight. My name is Gail Byrne. I work at 180, which is a local behavioral health care agency. We service Wayne, Holmes, and Holmes counties. The Watch Coalition, which stands for Wayne, Holmes, and Ashland Anti-Trafficking Coalition, is sponsoring this event to commemorate Human Trafficking Awareness Month. On the table where you came in and signed in, lots of information to please take with you and share with others. It's really important to get the word out and accurate facts. Also, there are some notepads. If you wanted to take any notes, there are binders with paper on the inside. This is swag that we had before we changed our name. We used to be just the Wayne County Coalition, and now we've added Ashland and Holmes. So both of those things have the old logo on them. So I just want to put that out there, but please take all that you like, and then snacks are over here. Feel free to move around the room at any point that you like.
Anyone would want, I can come and bring one to you if you just raise your hand.
So as I said, my name is Gail. I'm here from 180 and representing the Watch Coalition. And so what we're going to do, kind of the structure of the evening, is I'm going to give a relatively short overview of human trafficking in general. Since there are a variety of people in the room, some that know lots about it, some that know nothing about it, and then the entire continuum in between, I thought it might be a nice place to start with some general information. And then we're going to hear from the mayor of Ashland and his wife, who is a new state representative. Then we'll hear from Rayetta Cantors, and she's going to speak about the law enforcement side of human trafficking and share some of her experiences and vast knowledge. And then we'll finish with a survivor. And her name is Christina Jackson, and she's going to tell her story. And if at any point during anyone's presentation you have a question, please feel free to raise your hand, stop the presentation, and ask your question, because if there's a potential to make this a dynamic dialogue, we are open for that and happy to answer any questions you have. And then at the end of those presentations, we'll allow for 15-20 minutes of open question and answer. So if you have a question but it's not burning and you can wait till the end, that's fine as well. So whatever makes you comfortable. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. We're going to talk about sex and labor trafficking with a heavier emphasis on the sex trafficking part of it. And I thought I'd start simply by sharing our coalition's mission. So we are a community of social service agencies, law enforcement, the court system, that all get together. Basically, any piece of the community that would touch a victim and survivor of human trafficking, we all get together on a monthly basis and talk about how we can do things better or differently to serve survivors. So if a victim were to call the National Human Trafficking Hotline, one of the first things they're asked is where they are living or where they're from. And based on that answer, the national hotline would refer them to the local coalition, which is Watch. And then from there, how it works is 180 is the agency that would assist adult survivors, and the Children's Advocacy Center, which is located right here in Worcester, services Wayne, Ashland, and Holmes counties as well. They would service minor survivors. So that's sort of the continuum of how it works in terms of servicing survivors that call to the national hotline. So we're really doing things like this. We're trying to bring awareness and education to the community and do things better than they've been done in the past. And as I said, we focus on these 3 counties. So I think it's important to start with what the definition of human trafficking is, which is exploitation of human beings through force, fraud, or coercion. And the purpose of this is for commercial sex or forced labor. The most important part of this definition is that a third party makes the profit. So if you think about the average person's concept of prostitution, one person shares their body in exchange for money with a buyer. That's prostitution. In human trafficking, that same transaction occurs, but somebody else makes the money. That someone else would be the trafficker. And that trafficker could be a family member, it could be a gang member, it could be a business owner, it could be organized crime. There are lots of different ways that people are trafficked. So it's important to know that. But the real point is that it's a third party that's making the money. Also, a victim does not have to be moved from place to place. There's a concept of people traveling across borders, traveling from state to state. It's not uncommon for a victim to be trafficked out of their own home, go to their job during the day, or in the case of younger people, students go to school every day and are trafficked at night and on the weekends. So there's no requirement of movement across borders. Next, I thought it was important to share the difference between smuggling and trafficking. We have this concept, many people have this concept, they see on the news the big semi-trucks with 100 people packed inside coming across the border, right? That happens, that's smuggling, because all of those people in that truck, it's a horrible, heinous situation, right? But what got those people in that truck to get across the border is their desire to leave their home for a better life. They're tricked, they're exploited, they're violated, but it started as the wish for a better life, and it was voluntary. That is a crime against a country and against immigration law. Whereas with human trafficking, I already told you it doesn't require movement. This is a crime against the individual. The person that is being exploited, the trafficker is exploiting them. It's a crime against one person, and it's involuntary. So that's the big difference, voluntary versus involuntary, crime against the state or country, crime against an individual. All this makes sense so far? All right. So there are three things involved in human trafficking: force, fraud, or coercion, that must be in place to be considered human trafficking. Coercion doesn't have to be physical. Force doesn't have to be physical. This can be emotional manipulation, mental manipulation. If you think about children, you think about a 10-year-old, 12-year-old, 14-year-old. They're so impressionable and easily influenced that it's not necessarily a situation of physically forcing a child into human trafficking. Could very likely be all that parental authority figure manipulation, or the high school student with a much older boyfriend that's buying her beautiful gifts and taking her places and whining and dining her, and she's looking for love. That is a common scenario as well, but there's no physical force. It starts out as a voluntary relationship that turns ugly. So just some numbers to share with you. Human trafficking is the third largest illegal business in the world. The sale of guns is the first, drugs is second, human trafficking is third. So we're talking about $150 billion a year industry, just to kind of put some scope around it. And also people often think, well, I hear about human trafficking, I know it happens, but it doesn't happen here, it doesn't happen in the US. This is a third world thing. Actually, the United States is number one globally. We don't have the largest population, but we're number one globally with human trafficking. Mexico is 2 and Honduras is 3. And the reason for that, shared by Dr. Holly Atkinson, who runs a large human trafficking medical-based organization out of Washington, D.C., says it's because you can sell a human 10 or 20 times, 10, 20, 30 times a day, where you're only selling a gun once. Drugs aren't renewable. Humans are. They can be exploited over and over and over, and they are. It's big, big money. So what's the situation in Ohio? Well, These numbers change from year to year, but Ohio is the 6th largest rate of reported cases and the 5th largest in volume of cases. And although it changes, this number changes from year to year, Ohio is always 5 or 6. We only ever bump up or fall down by maybe one position, and this is over a number of years. Ohio is, for being a pretty rural state and not one of the highest populated, to make it to the top 5 or 6 is really alarming. So let's talk about that for a minute. Why on earth is Ohio so high in these numbers? Here are the reasons. You can't sell something if there's no one that wants to buy it, right? So demand. There's a lot of demand from buyers of sex and labor in Ohio. Drugs are a huge component. Over the last few years, methamphetamine, fentanyl, big players in the drug scene, at least in this area, but a number of drugs throughout the state. Also, we have lots of interstate highways. So it's easy to transport people from Canada, Michigan, Ohio, and then from there, east and west and north and south. Interstate highways play a big part in the scenario. Also, we have a high rural population, lots of transient folks. So it's not as noticeable when you're talking about small towns, farming communities, agricultural communities, and people come and go. It's not as obvious or trackable, which makes Ohio a really obvious choice for traffickers. Also, we have a large immigrant population, and this is a lot of migrant workers, factory workers account for that population. And that comes with its own issues. Things like language barriers, communities where there are a lot of undocumented workers are very mistrustful of outsiders. And those outsiders would be the police, for instance, the court system, the school system. They're afraid to share what's happening because of the fear of being deported or being discriminated against. If they are legal, which many are, but being discriminated against, so they just don't speak out. Also, there are some cultures where sharing your personal family business goes against the cultural norms. So a lot of different reasons why immigrant populations are particularly vulnerable in Ohio. And then just 2 statistics. I didn't want to make this a big numbers situation, but the average age of entry into sex trafficking is 12 to 14. So this may or may not surprise you to know that, but oftentimes we're talking about children. On average, the amount of time that a victim stays in human trafficking is up to 7 years. Uh-oh, I wonder what happened. Oh, tech person. 7 years is the lifespan of the average human trafficked person, and that's a number of reasons. They either die, they escape, or the trafficked becomes the trafficker. Those are the 3 ways of getting out of the life, as it's called, or the game. Those 3 ways. And more often than not, it is trafficked becomes trafficker or death. I don't remember what came next, so we just have to wait for a second.
Vulnerability factors.
Yes. Oh, vulnerability factors. Okay. So there's going to be a long list of vulnerability factors. So what gets people, mostly girls, but there are lots of boys that are trafficked as well. It's up to a third, about 36% actually, of trafficked victims are boys. So the majority is girls, but we've got a number of boys involved here as well. And there are a lot of vulnerability factors. So I'm not going to go through all of them because you'll be able to read when it makes it to the screen. But some of the key vulnerability factors are runaway youth. So 1 in 5 are runaway youth. At the end of the day, it is filling a hole, filling a need in someone's life, whether it's a need for finances, drugs, independence, getting away from a broken home, getting out of foster care. There are so many different places people are running from, but the vast majority, and the slide will tell me for sure, but I think it's 93.5% of human trafficked victims are a product of child sexual assault. So in the mindset, if you try to put yourself in the mindset of a victim, if they have been taught or socialized from their youngest memories that their body is a commodity, then going from that boyfriend relationship who's buying me nice things kind of thing to, hey, sleep with this guy for $50, it's not a big transition because they've been monetized their whole lives. It's that kind of thing that happens very, very frequently. Foster care system, 60% of trafficked victims report being a product of the foster care system. So we've got runaways, foster care, drugs, either young people, children, teens, early 20s that have a substance misuse issue in their lives, or when they become involved with a trafficker, they are coerced into using substances, and that's what keeps them under control. So that's a factor as well. So those are some of the key factors in terms of vulnerability, and there are many others, but those are some of the keys, and we'll get it here eventually. Also, the last thing I want to finish with is physical and mental long-term results. So physically, it's everything you would imagine. It's sexually transmitted diseases, it's unwanted pregnancies, it's physical wounds because some people are physically abused. So those are some of the big ones physically. Mentally, it's probably everything you would imagine as well. PTSD, anxiety, depression, isolation, hypervigilance, fear of being involved in intimate relationships of any sort, or over-involvement because of the lack of understanding those boundaries of what's a healthy relationship. All of these things are different mental impacts as well. And then the last thing I'll finish with is barriers to seeking assistance. So it's real easy to sit back and think, oh my gosh, this sounds like the worst possible situation. Why on earth would someone live in this situation? Why wouldn't they just get help, ask for help, run away, whatever? So if you've ever heard of Stockholm Syndrome, pretty well-known syndrome, that's oftentimes the case because there is a lot of shame and humiliation involved in human trafficking. And because more often than not, at the very beginning, it's a consensual, voluntary relationship, whether that is a worker with an employer or prospective employer, or the boyfriend relationship, or parents. 41% of the time, family members are the traffickers. And if that seems particularly heinous to you, it does to me too, think of it this way. Think about the mom, single mom, who can't pay the mortgage or can't pay the rent. Add on to that, what if she is addicted to drugs or alcohol and has this overwhelming need for the substance that she abuses, and she can't pay the mortgage or the rent, but has a 14-year-old daughter? This is how it happens. We know stories of in Minnesota, two teenagers on the cheerleading squad, a senior cheerleader exploiting one of her co-cheerleaders that was a freshman. She put an ad on the internet. She would drive her freshman cheerleader companion to and from her Johns. She finally was caught and she got 3 years. There was a man in Tennessee that used a 15-year-old boy at the high school to recruit girls. He charged $100 and he gave that 15-year-old boy $20 for every girl that he brought him. What a great incentive if you're a 15-year-old boy in high school. And for those kids that their body has been monetized, I mean, it's not a bad gig. You make a few bucks. It's just a transaction. Meanwhile, 15-year-old boys making boatloads of money and the trafficker's making all the rest. So those are just some examples of how it really happens in real life. But why people don't reach out? Because of the fact that oftentimes these are voluntary relationships at the onset, there's so much guilt and humiliation and shame about ending in that situation that they feel they're not worthy of asking for help, or they don't even identify themselves as victims. Or there's no family to go to. There's nowhere to live. There's no way to eat. There's no income. Who's going to take care? And the trafficker takes care. So those are some of the barriers for asking for help. So with that, I am going to end my presentation, which isn't up anyway. So that's easy enough. That's easy enough. And we're going to move to Matt and Melanie Miller. So Matt is, I'm going to trip over this first. So Matt is the mayor of Ashland, as I mentioned at the onset, and Melanie is his wife, and they're just going to share a few comments before we move to our next speaker. So welcome. And if whoever is speaking will.
Okay, this is the one.
Uh-oh. Yeah, there you go. Thank you.
Yes. Listen, thank you so much for letting us join you here this evening. And Gail, you did a tremendous job of explaining to all of us that human trafficking is so much more than what you might have seen in an after-school special of a van pulling up in the mall parking lot, taking someone and selling them to someone else across the state lines. It is so much more. And that's why often when this issue is raised, I think a lot of the folks in our communities, whether that be Worcester, whether that be Millersburg or Ashland, we think, well, I don't know that that really takes place around here. The truth of the matter is, when you hear all of the different ways we define human trafficking, it does take place around here. And I'll use this as an example. It was just a few years ago in Ashland County, we had a 13-year-old girl, just as you described, a 13-year-old girl who started coming to school and hanging out with her friends, and she had an unusually large amount of money. She would have hundreds of dollars in her possession at a time. She had $1,000 or more at one point, and her friends are wondering, what's going on? How are you getting this money? Well, it turns out she had met an adult man from outside of our area in another major city here in the state of Ohio. And what was she doing? She'd met him on the internet, and he was paying her to send him pictures of herself. That's a sad story in and of itself, but it gets even worse. When her friends found out how she was making this money, they started to participate as well. And the whole thing got uncovered when that adult man decided that he was going to make a trek to our area to meet them in person. Isn't it interesting? That's why I say you did an outstanding job of describing and defining what human trafficking is in so many different ways, and in particular, how it has played out here in our community. You know, I talked to our prosecutor and police chief and asked them, I said, so when it comes to human trafficking, can you tell me, like, how many cases would we have had over the last decade and so on? And of course, the county prosecutor's probably in the best position to answer that question. And he said, it's such a hard question to answer because he said the truth is, if you've got hotels in your community and you've got internet access in your homes, then chances are there's a lot more of human trafficking going on in this community than what we've been able to discover. And his comment to me that probably has been the most poignant is just that. He said, anytime a home has internet connectivity and you've got young children or you've got teens or even older individuals, you are susceptible to human trafficking. And I just want to share that with you tonight so that you know meetings like this, even in rural Ohio, are important because we are all on a mission to raise awareness on this issue and rid our communities and, of course, our state, country, and world ultimately of this tragedy that is facing so many individuals. Now, Melanie is actually serving as our new state representative for Ashland and Medina County. And Melanie has a unique perspective because several years ago, she was actually invited to be a part of a documentary that was put together, I believe by the name of Yellow Roses, to highlight the existence of human trafficking right here in the heartland. So I'll let Melanie take over from here.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you again for having Matt and I tonight. And certainly we are not experts on this issue, but we've been exposed a little at a time. Matt is right. So there is a documentary called Yellow Roses. In fact, there are two documentaries. One is called Yellow Roses, Real Girls, Real Life, Real Hope. And it's really a film that girls just sit and talk about their experience. You would think that's boring to listen to, but it's very, very interesting as these girls share their hearts about what has happened in their life. There is a small group study that goes along with that. There's also another film that I was a part of called Shadow on the Heartland. And this is probably about 10 years ago or so, but it again highlighted this issue in our state. And back then, Toledo, Ohio, if I remember right, was the largest per capita, or the third largest per capita in the country, because of a lot of the intersections and things that may have changed looking at your statistics.
Toledo's number 4 largest volume in human trafficking city in the nation, and Columbus is tied for 10.
Wow.
And these are current statistics.
Wow. Wow. So this is certainly something we need to just simply be aware of. I know in my involvement with some of these projects, I got to know a woman by the name of Marlene, and she started a ministry called Rahab's House. And I believe it was in Columbus, and she is trying to get something started in southern Ashland County, but housing women who are trying to rescue them out of the sex trafficking industry. And these women, obviously Marlene herself was formerly in this industry, and I don't remember her full story offhand how she was rescued, but that's what one of her life's missions now is, to rescue these young women, to get them out of the industry, to offer them a place to find purpose again in their life. I know they do different projects and to sell items so that they can, earn a living wage, and getting them plugged back into society. But it's been very eye-opening, certainly. And as a state representative, I know this is definitely an area I hope to tackle and protect our young people in this state. I also serve as a director of a pregnancy center in Ashland County, and listening to some of the things where you hear unwanted pregnancy and STD, STI challenges. That's what a lot of our pregnancy centers are doing. You have one in Wayne County as well. And so I think a lot of pregnancy centers are going to begin seeing more and more women come to our centers for help. And so even for our volunteers and for our staff, it's so important to be aware of the warning signs or any flags so that we can work together with law enforcement and offer these girls a way out. And I know in many of our restrooms, we all have something on the back of our door so that we know there's something she could let us know by writing a word or something that she needs help, because a lot of times the trafficker does not allow her out of their presence. They're a lot more forceful. So we are also putting safeguards in place in our ministries so that way we can, again, protect that woman when she comes to our centers for help. So I know you want to add.
It may sound simplistic, but in our county and in the law enforcement community in Ashland County, we continually tell people, see something, say something. That's no doubt not nothing that we coined in Ashland, but that is such a meaningful statement. If you see something, say something. Most all of our law enforcement agencies here in this region and around the state, for that matter, have anonymous tip lines. You can call. You don't have to give your identity. If you see something, say something. And with that in mind, I would challenge you to even think already. Have you not seen those situations or been in those venues? I can think of particular venues that you would shake your head up and down, but I'm not going to, because certainly not all of these venues are doing something they shouldn't be doing. But there have been those venues I'm sure you visited over the years that you've had an odd feeling about someone that was helping you. Maybe someone that was doing your nails, or someone that was perhaps, you never see them anywhere else, but you see them there at that location. You don't see them. We're small communities. We can get to know the people that live here, can't we? We see them in the store. We see them on the street. We see them at church. We see them all around. But then there are some that you never see anywhere but at a particular location. If you see something and are suspicious that someone might be held against their will or be in a trapped situation, you need to speak up and say something. And like I say, so many of our local law enforcement agencies have ways for you to do that without ever having to give your own identity or risk your own name getting out by making that complaint. So just keep that in mind.
I would just say, I see there's a lot of women in this room, and you probably all can relate, but I think of a lot of times from my experience, from what I have heard, that a lot of times traffickers will use women to bring other women into the trafficker, because women tend to be more nurturing, more trusting. And I've heard many horror stories of women in the work that I do, even when recently there was in another state, a woman, a mama bear now really, who was grocery shopping with her two small children, a 4-year-old little girl, little blondie, and she had a little boy. And she noticed right away when she went into the grocery store, she had her little girl that was on the back of the cart holding on, mommy's pushing the cart, and the baby in the front in a carrier or a little seat. And right away she said, I noticed when I came into the grocery store, there was a man that everywhere I went, he would be in the same aisle as me. And my hairs just sort of went, just kind of stood up. And she said, and it was interesting, when she went to check out, there was a woman that got in between her and her children. So what it ended up being was they were planning to take her 4-year-old little girl. They were planning to take her. She was able to identify, I'm fast forwarding very quickly, but the man that was following her, that's what that woman was planning to do, was to capture the little girl, and they had a vehicle outside ready to take her little girl with that man. And this man ended up going to jail, and he had taken many other little girls, but they were planning to take their little girl into trafficking, is what they were going to do, and to raise her. So I would just encourage you to be aware of your surroundings, especially as young women. I remember as a kid wanting to go to the mall, and my mom would always say, oh no, you're not going by yourself, or you're not even going with your girlfriend. Just be mindful of your surroundings. I know Marlene, who is with Rahab's house. I remember she told me once when she was in Columbus, she did a sting operations with law enforcement, and she went to Polaris Mall, Columbus, Ohio, and was walking around, and she saw maybe young teenage girls, maybe 14 or so, and it was 2 girls, and there was there were 3 girls total, 2 friends, and then one girl who you could tell was very upset at her mom. And she said, I could pick up on the conversation enough to know what she was upset about, and it was because her mom wouldn't buy her a designer purse, and her other friend's parents bought her friends a designer purse. So she said, I knew what the problem was, why she was mad. I went to that store, bought the designer purse, and I saw the 3 girls sitting in the food court having, a soda. And she came right up to the table, and she put the designer purse on the table and slid it to the girl who was upset and said, baby girl, here's this gift for you. And the girl accepted the gift. And she said within 10 minutes, she had all 3 of those girls in her vehicle just by making that connection. So if she was truly a trafficker, those girls would have never been seen again. So just a simple story like that, it really puts it into perspective how easy it can be to take someone. So I would really encourage your girls, talk to them about these situations. Don't accept a gift. A gift is never free. There's always strings attached, quite frankly, you know, especially with a stranger, and to be aware of your surroundings. I know even me as a young woman, I consider myself still a young woman, but I'm always mindful when I'm in parking garages or anything like that too, that I am never too afraid to call someone to walk me to my car. Even now in the State House, we have law enforcement everywhere, and I can't tell you how many of them have said, you know, Representative Miller, please do not be afraid. All you got to do is press a button and we'll be there in 30 seconds to escort you wherever you need to go. Do not be afraid. So, you know, all it takes is one time. And so to just be mindful, be aware of those things. Because yes, thank you for listening to us. Appreciate that.
Truly, and thank you for shining a light on the issue right here in our backyard, because this is probably one of the few events like this going on right here in rural northeastern or north central Ohio. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your words. I really appreciate that. And I do want to just say that the stories that they shared are so impactful. And I do want to mention also that on a national level, when we look at the tens of thousands of victims on an annual basis, year after year, what I was describing as initially voluntary in some sort of relationship is much more the commonplace situation. So there are absolutely stories, you just heard them, about girls being taken, boys being taken. What is most common is runaways. The statistic is actually that a runaway, the likelihood of being approached by a trafficker within the first 36 hours of running away from home is greater than 70%. It's that vulnerability piece. And the boyfriend scenario, the employer scenario, the family scenario, where there's already a relationship, are far and wide the more common situations. So I do not want you to leave this presentation with the idea that it's not safe to go to the mall. But like they were saying, it's important to be aware. It's very important to be aware. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to our next speaker, who is Rayetta Canters, and I'm going to read her biography because it's way too impressive for me to memorize. So Rayetta is a graduate of Ashland University, where she earned her Bachelor of Science in Criminal Justice. She served for 25 years with the Ohio State Highway Patrol, a career that eventually led to the coordination of a multi-agency operation that resulted in a record number of simultaneous arrests in her region for child exploitation and sex trafficking related offenses, and brought new attention in her region to the problem of human trafficking. She also has experience as a certified investigator, patrol officer, part-time detective, and prison investigator. And she was a member of the FBI Child Exploitation Task Force and was deputized by the U.S. Marshals Service. So as a law enforcement officer, she passionately addressed this issue of human trafficking and sought justice in circumstances where predators had preyed on the vulnerable. She continues to work as a background investigator for pre-employment, for local law enforcement, and as a resource to law enforcement when they're conducting human trafficking investigations. So she obviously has a long and storied career, and she's going to talk about the law enforcement perspective on this issue and her own experiences. So please help me welcome Rayetta Canters.
Hello, again, I'm Rayetta, and thank you for having me. I'm going to pin this here because I have cards, and I am not a public speaker, so you all bear with me. And this PowerPoint was done by me, and it is very generic. I know they wanted me to come out here and talk to you about my experiences, and some of that's going to be weaved into the presentation, but I wanted to start out with a video, and I do not know the details of this case, but it was introduced to me I looked into it, and what I got that I was a little fascinated about was the timeline. So I'm going to let you listen to this video real quick, and then we're going to go on from there. And then I'm going to, hopefully what my goal is, everything that has already been said here by Gail, by the mayor and his wife, you're a senator, ma'am? State representative, is my goal, is when I get to the end of my presentation, basically they already stole my thunder. So, hey. But anyway, you're going to see, because how many of us have kids in here? How many of us have kids? Yeah. And you're going to see where my presentation is about. My presentation is about, guess what? We're the first line of defense when it comes to our babies, okay? So we're going to start off with this video. This is regarding a 15-year-old who was taken from Texas. It was in Texas, and it was at the Dallas Maverick basketball game. So, and I'll get into more details as we go. Is it going to play, or do I need to? Nope. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead. I will, if this is not going to play. All right, so you saw that picture. What it was a broadcast, basically giving you some highlights of what happened. So I'm going to give you a rundown of what happened at this event. This happened on April 8th, 2022. Again, this was at a Dallas Maverick. probably at one time was trafficked. And she had now moved up to be a trafficker. Took the pictures and she posted the photos online. A couple days later, he was finally arrested along with this other female in the car. See, this is my car right here. She admitted to also being in the room when the photos were taken and also giving, also posting ads. Now these other ones were arrested later on. They were all connected into the one circle, but they were not directly at the time of the news release. Were connected to the 15-year-old. Okay. So on April 18th, finally, through the investigation, Oklahoma City was able to locate the female. They were able to get the 15-year-old, get her located and returned home, and then the additional arrests were made. Again, this timeline is just from information that I collected, online, but I wanted to show you how fast this happened. This young lady was taken on the 8th and not found to the 18th. By the 14th, the pictures were found of her online with no clothes on, being advertised for sex. It's not the date that those pictures were posted. So those pictures were most likely posted online a lot earlier than the Texas Coalition group where we found them. So this was just like a highlight. I think when we Internet crimes against children, the Canton FBI, Jackson Township Police Department in Stark County was the primary, but State Highway Patrol. It's a group of do. They go to websites, different social media platforms, and they start talking to strangers. And then during the training, basically they put themselves as if they were at the age of 15. And for the sake of our prosecutor who was with us, our Stark County prosecutor who was with us, it was a 15-year-old girl or a 15-year-old boy. We used those two ages, those two for the ages. Anyway, the first predator to our thing was a AT&T. There we go. An AT&T worker. And the reason why this one stuck out to me is because how many of our kids are left home alone, like during summer vacations, Christmas break, or whatever, why we go to work. This AT&T worker pulled up in his AT&T work truck, parked by a pole, got out of his truck with his green vest, went to one of the poles, put out his cone for his safety to let you know he was being, doing his job. And at first we weren't sure if he was our person. He sat there at the pole, wrote down some notes, and then after that, he proceeded to walk towards the house that we were occupying. What we did is we had a house that was a model. It was a new neighborhood in an undisclosed location in Jackson Township. And we took over this house, and this is where we were all set up at. So when he walked into the house thinking that he was going to have sex with a 15-year-old, he was met with an arrest team. And of course, he was taken down. Some of the other highlights of, or I shouldn't say highlights, but some of the other people who showed up was a teacher, a preschool teacher from the YWCA, and then we even had somebody who was an ex-counselor for the Rape Crisis Center. There was a total of 14 predators, and I call them predators, I'm sorry, because they came there knowing that they were going to have, thinking they were going to have sex with a 15-year-old. They were not only there to meet girls, we were lucky to have an officer, and she's this little tiny thing. She was from Carroll County at the time, and she has her hair so that she can play either a female or a boy because of the way she has it cut. So she was able, because there was times where these predators, they wanted to see what they were getting. So she would step out, but there was times that they were meeting girls, and there were some of the predators who wanted to meet boys. I wanted to point out that all these predators come in all types of backgrounds. There's different races, there's different employment, economic statuses, etc. Do not stereotype, profile, whatever the words you want to use on what a trafficker is or what a predator is, because you don't know. You absolutely don't know. I've had personal friends, one recently, and this just happened a month ago. Her 10-year-old daughter was staying a night at, and we talked about the single parent, correct? Well, this was a dad who was a single dad with a daughter. And my friends did not want to discriminate against that single dad, so they allowed their daughter to stay a night with him a couple times. Well, he finally did something that alerted law enforcement, and unfortunately, they learned that while she was staying a night there, this father was standing aside between their daughter and his daughter, unclothed, masturbating, and photographing both of these children, even his own. And there was 2 other things. So don't stereotype. I don't like stereotypes. I don't like profiles. I look at it as this, you all. Anybody can be trafficked. Anybody can be a trafficker. Okay? There is no set description, step profile. You need to be aware, just like it was mentioned already, your surroundings. I received this slide. I stole it from Suzanne Lewis Johnson with NoMoreTrafficking.com, because this is where I wanted to end my presentation. This is where I wanted to come. My telling you these stories was to bring to you to aware that when you're not aware of what's going on in your own home, you're already behind the 8 ball. But in her slide, of course, she had in a 911 emergency, you call 911. Report suspected criminal conduct. I don't know why we've gotten away from helping each other, or we want to stay, we don't want to get involved. I don't know, but you need to be involved. And like someone mentioned, you don't have to leave your name. Call the necessary, law enforcement agency, get them there, let them do their job. Let them determine there's nothing going on. Don't you try to determine, because there's so much into what goes on and the grooming. This grooming starts with talking a lot of times. It's starting with conversations. It's starting with relationships. Having conversations and set boundaries, expectations, conduct in your home and vehicle, use of internet connected devices. This was more geared to where her and I were discussing, and this comes from what the situation I just told you about. I am not a big techie person, but I'm not going to take away from techie, but we have gotten to the point where we depend on technology, and we're not having conversations anymore with our kids. You need to sit down and you need to have a conversation with your kids, and you need to be direct with your kids, and you need to let them know what's going on. These stories, this 15-year-old, what happened to her, what I just told you would happen to my friend's 10-year-old. You also need to have boundaries in your home. Like in my house, when my kid was coming up, he's now 27, and when he came over, I asked him, I said, why won't kids come over here and stay the night with, over here? Because they know they can't drink. There was no drinking allowed in my house. I didn't care how old you are, what you did at your own house, but it was known. Also, there was no sex allowed in my house. My kid, when he became of age and was still living with us for a little while, I said, nope, get your own place. Set those boundaries and expectations. And you do that with your kids, that will carry on, and that sets that foundation, so that if something doesn't seem right for them, they'll know to come and tell you or do something to help themselves, right? Use of internet connected devices. This was my thunder, Mayor. You took this exactly what he said. If you are not monitoring your children's, I don't care how old, until they are 18 and above, if that is your house, that is your phone, that is your Xbox, that is your PlayStation, that does not belong to that child. When they want to tell you that's mine and you don't have a right to look at it, oh, you tell them, get that phone. You don't, and passwords, there should be no passwords on your kids' phones. You should be able to pick that phone up anytime and look at that phone and see who they're talking to. Because if you're not, you are already behind. That trafficker has already gotten into your house, has already started talking to your kid, because that's where it's starting at. Majority of this is starting online, on phones. Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok. I admit, I love TikTok. I love watching the animals and do stupid stuff and like that. But it's amazing how many people have requested to be my friend that I do not even know, and they're females. And I'll go and I'll look at their sites, onto their sites, and guess what? You can't see nothing until you befriend them. But I look at their pictures and I'm like, this is something. That's what's happening with your kids. When they're playing on Xbox, 2:30 in the morning, what child should be up playing, first of all, on a video game at 2:30 in the morning? But it happens. Who are they talking to? Do you know who they're talking to? Because I'm going to tell you what, they're there too. They're coming in and they're asking, let's go to another room. Those little secret rooms, that's where everything happens at. That's where the conversation starts. They're going to turn you against your family. They're going to tell them how much they care about them, how special they are. They're going to get you to that child to the point where that child won't trust you, but only trust them. So your internet, you got to be more direct with your kids, and then you're going to have to set those boundaries. Create a community and take responsible actions. Surround your kids with trusted mentors who will tell you of concerns. Talk to your other kids' parents, teachers, counselors when you notice concerns related to your child or another. Basically, be a responsible adult. I feel that we've gotten away from going to teacher conferences. Why? They want to do everything online, right? They want to send a report online. They don't want to sit down. You don't want to sit down and talk face to face. But these are the people who are with your children, like 6 to 8 hours a day, coaches, so on and so forth. Why aren't you going and talking to these people? They know your child. They know who they're hanging out with. They know how their moods are. They know how they're interacting with other children if there's fighting going on. There is so much that we're missing because we're not having the face-to-face conversations anymore, that people who are willing to have those conversations are ahead of us because of that. And that's why human trafficking has become so, because that, and that's just why it's winning. That's what I want to say. And it's so funny when we mentioned Toledo. My first assignment as a trooper was over in Defiance, Ohio. And we stopped the vehicle. I was working midnights, and I was in coach pupil still. And it was a car, and it was a black male driving, and there was three females, and they were all in there doing their makeup. There was a bunch of radios, and and we didn't know at that time. At that time, like you said, we were talking. We said prostitution. She was at the time, she was a FBI. A female put a detective in his truck, and he would chat, and he would talk to these girls online. Off of the truck for her to have sex with this man. And everything's like, they just to us. So Suzanne's and I, and then the victim advocate talking to her, and we're trying to. She had on a pair of house shoes. This is the way this man took her to her, you know. He didn't care about what she looked like. A pair of house shoes that our grandmas used to wear. Extension. Our victim advocate, we were able to get her put down. Like she was going to go to be safe. It was. Well, there was a problem. She had a, and he had. So we were able to get a group of officers to get the child and bring it to her. The sad thing is, when and she wouldn't cooperate anymore. He's my protector. He gives me clothing, a place to sleep, which he doesn't give her clothing. But she wouldn't give it. She wouldn't give him up. So we did take things in our hands, because when we went to that house smelled dirty. Another officer, because this was Kansas City, child services. I know it's not harsh, but we can't, knowing what we knew, let that child go back into that environment. Unfortunately, because she didn't cooperate with us, I believe she was also charged. And I know that's probably something we don't hate to hear, but when she didn't want to cooperate with the person. So those are the highlights that I like to share, but that's the reality. Okay. So basically, that's my presentation. I wanted you to all just kind of see how this goes, how fast things can happen, especially for a child. And my suspicions about that 15-year-old, I didn't want to take. I have my suspicions. I'm sure some of you, from the information I was able to give you, have some suspicions on how this little girl at 15 years old at the big arena, Dallas Maverick, and why her and only her, and I'll just keep it like that. But I wanted to bring awareness more so that with no more trafficking, which there's information on the table. I hope you guys grab the newsletter. We're just getting our hands going, and this is what we want to do, is get out there, give tools and get people started, talking and stuff. But I want conversation. This is what I did this for you to think about, take it home, talk to your family, your kids especially, open those conversations up, and make sure everybody's on the same, aware of what is going around, because it's here. It's just difficult. It's very difficult to get these predators or traffickers. So thank you for your time. Sorry if the videos didn't, you had to listen to me more, but I appreciate it.
Thank you so much. That was awesome. I made a couple of notes from others, and I just want to point out, I've mentioned about the different pieces of information on the table. When the mayor was talking, it reminded me of something that we forgot to bring. We have at our agency a laminated 8.5 by 11. It's a poster, but it asks, are you a victim of? And it talks about domestic violence, sexual assault, human trafficking. And then there is a pad, a small pad stuck to it with like 50 tear-off sheets. So there's our hotline number, 1-800 hotline number, and also a QR code. And the purpose of these is to be put in bathrooms, restrooms, in businesses, churches, anywhere that people go, right? but the bathroom is the perfect place because there's privacy. So for people, a trafficked person even, or an abused person, they could either take a tear pad or they could just take a picture on their phone. So they're not walking out of the bathroom with anything on their person. So I just want to let you know, we forgot to bring them, but so thank you for mentioning that. But they are available. We have lots and lots of them. So if you work for an agency that you'd like some of those, or a business that you'd like to have some of those, please speak with me after and I'll take down your information because we have them to give out and we really want them in the community. And then the second note that I took was about trainings, specifically at Watch. We do these sorts of trainings, hour to an hour and a half trainings, and we do them in places like churches, adult Sunday school, or full congregations. We do them with faculty at elementary schools, middle schools, high schools. We do them in social work classes, education classes. And part of the goal of doing these trainings is to help people identify. You know, imagine you're a teacher, an 8th grade teacher. You don't know anything about human trafficking. So to be able to talk to these teachers about signs to look for in their students, because an elementary school student versus a middle school versus a high school student might act in different ways based on their maturity level. But it's important for teachers to know kind of the things to look for. That's what we offer in this training. And to go into a church or a business, a lot of people have kids. And if they don't have kids, they have nieces and nephews. They have other relatives. And so that awareness piece of knowing what to look for, because as the mayor said, if you see something, say something. But if you don't know what you're looking for, it's harder to say something if you see something, you know? If the hair doesn't stand up on the back of your neck, you're not necessarily going to act. So giving people some education about what the signs are is really, really important. So again, speak to me afterwards or to Angela and share with us if you think that you'd like this training for your business or congregation or whatever social club you belong to, that kind of thing. So I just wanted to do those 2 clubs. Lastly, we have a survivor of human trafficking to speak to us and to share her story. Christina, if you'd like to come up. Do you have it? Oh, with this. Where's the microphone?
I'm working on it. I might interrupt you and give you a
Oh, okay.
It's okay.
We've got some feedback that we want to use the actual microphone, not so much for this room, but for the online streaming. So scream until she gets it. So everyone, this is Christina Jackson. She's 47 years old, and kudos to her for saying how old she is to a group of strangers. And she is a survivor. She currently works for Rahab Ministries, which Melanie mentioned. So Rahab is an organization that works specifically with survivors of human trafficking. She'll tell you all about that. And she's a program specialist there. And she is currently in the process of seeking educational avenues for further study about this topic. She says her biggest levels of achievement are overcoming mental health issues, drug addiction, and self-sabotage. So please help me welcome Christina. I apologize for all the technical snafus. Oh, that's great.
You got it?
Yeah. All right, thank you.
So my name is Christina LaPointe Jackson, and I am a survivor of trafficking. My trafficking happened when I was a child, but because of it and due to my mental health issues as an adult, I began to traffic myself for the next 20 years, okay? I do work for Rahab Ministries in Canton, Ohio. We have a house in Matthews. It's a drop-in. I do not believe it's the same one that young lady was talking about. Our logo is Reaching Above Hopelessness and Brokenness, and we help anybody affected by human trafficking. I'm here to tell you what happened to me and then how I came out of it, right? So I grew up in New Orleans, Louisiana to a single parent who had a boyfriend. And her boyfriend liked me as well as her. So I was molested at a really young age, and I lived in a place called Reserve, Louisiana, and it was like a spot on the map. Like we didn't even, the furthest, the closest Kmart was like 15 miles away. So I had a grandpa that I used to like to go to his house a lot when things at my house would be chaotic. And he was an alcoholic. My parents were alcoholics, and he was my safe haven. Well, one night I woke up and he was fondling me underneath the covers. So that safe haven was nil and void after that. At a really young age, I started to hate myself. I wanted different parents. I wanted to be in a different atmosphere. I remember that I used to have nightmares all the time of, I don't know, I just was always scared. I was a scared little girl, and I would hide. My mom and dad would have fist fights. I would try to protect my mom. I couldn't protect my mom and things of that nature. And so around, I'm gonna say around 7 years old, my mom had to go to Florida to put her dad to rest. And while she was gone, my stepdad brought in a woman, and while she was in my mom's household, she also molested me, and I had my first drink of alcohol. They got arrested. I didn't know at the time that they got arrested for drug dealing, breaking and entering, and we were taken from my mom. So we were put in foster home, me and my brother. Now, if we had the slides, they would say that foster home is part of the vulnerability for the trafficker. And so we were taken from my mom, and so my mom had to fight to get us back. So when she got us back, I had already had issues. Look what I did today. Isn't that amazing? I broke my glasses. But I can't see nobody without them. So I have to wear them. I wasn't putting tape on them though. So here I am. So I was starting to experience things like wanting to cut myself, depression, anxiety. Further along, we get taken again from my mom, and I am placed into a foster home where the foster parent used evolution as a means to come into my bedroom at night. He used the evolution of you used to be a baby monkey and you grew up as an adult for reasons to molest me at night. So it happens in foster home. I just always felt like I was there for a man to take, or a woman to take advantage of me. I get taken out of that foster home and I'm put back with my mom. I start using drugs around 10 or 11 years old. I start smoking marijuana, just years of chaos and, kind of like a Jerry Springer show. I mean, it was insane. At 12 years old, I got pregnant. And my mom was heavily addicted to alcohol and drugs. She wasn't giving me the proper care at home. I was seeking things outside of my home to fill that void that was inside of me. And I slept with older men. I had an older boyfriend at 12 years old. I was 12, and he was 38. I had my kid, and I gave it up for adoption because I couldn't take care of it, and I didn't want to leave my mom with that responsibility, because at the end of the day, that's my mom. And things that happened, I still loved her. I met a gentleman. By the way, I was in mental institutions too, because I tried to kill myself a couple times, and I was heavy on medication. And so I met the man of my dreams in a mental institution, and I really thought like I could move in with this guy when I run away. So I run away after I have my kid. I'm around 13, 14 years old. I run away from home, and I move in with him, his dad, and his other two brothers. And his dad didn't like me at all. Neither did his mom. So his mom and dad coerced a plan for me to sleep with the dad, so I'd still have to have a place to stay and date their son. And when I slept with the dad, it was a setup, And so I stayed in that household with this older man. I think he was 42 years old, and I was 14 and a half or something, living with his dad. They coerced me into sleeping with the father and threatened for me to be homeless if I didn't. 15 years old, I started working in a bar. And I'm kind of going to school at the time, and I meet one of my classmates, and she knows that I like to party, and she's like, I know where you can make some money. And so she took me right down the street, and I slept with somebody for money, and I didn't get paid, she did. Not that I regret that I didn't get paid, but it was a classmate, and I trusted her. I hung out with her at her house. I left home shortly after that, and I started working in a bar, and my life I was always in the alcoholic days, no matter what. And I have so much to my story, I have to skip over because I will keep us here all night, and I don't want to do that either. I drank from the time I came to the time I fell out. I used drugs. I hated myself. I hated everything that happened to me. I couldn't look in the mirror. And then I moved to Ohio. I moved to Ohio at the age of 17, and I get introduced to drugs, like really heavy drugs, and I'm off and running. Like I said, I've been using since I was 11. I think I took a 6-month break when I got pregnant. When I moved to Ohio from Louisiana, I have 2 kids. I have a son who's 3 when I leave him, and my daughter when she was 1. And I left for the next 20 years because I didn't want to take them through my addiction. I was trafficked as a child. And therefore, that trauma that I didn't know what to do with, I trafficked myself for the next 20 years. I've been arrested more than 20-something times. I've been to prison. I've been to Orienta houses and CBCFs. I have been on probation a few times. I had really bad mental health. I was on all types of medication. And I hated myself. In 2006, I got shot in the face due to my lifestyle. And when I woke up in the hospital, I was severely mad at God and asked him why I was here. And could I please just die because I didn't want to be here anymore. I always in and out of the Summit County Jail. They used to call me a piece of furniture because I was like, that was my second home. I had the privilege of speaking to the Stark County Training Center on Tuesday and get to tell the officers my story and how they treated me in there, and it wasn't always nice. So I get shot in 2006, and I get arrested. I get arrested because I tried to commit a crime, and I got caught. And it was a horrendous crime. I was going to try to set somebody on fire because they were bullying me, but the lighter I had just used would not work. So I get arrested, and I go to the county, and I'm in the county for 6 months, and I meet a judge who helped me. She helped me because she seen me as a human being and not just another case in front of her. And so I had so when I got shot, I had a scar tissue because the bullet went through here and came out here. So it took all of that, and they had to cut the flap down and heal. So I had to have 4 facial surgeries. The doctor said had I sat up anymore, I wouldn't be here. He said a hair, if I would have just sat up a hair. So I meet this judge. She's no longer with us. Her name was Brenda Unruh, and she's from Summit County Jail. Summit County, not Summit County Jail. I meet her, and she loves Jesus. And at the time, I knew Jesus by, I knew God, like, oh God, please bring me through this one. I won't drink again, when I'm holding the toilet or something. Or, oh God, don't let me get arrested today. I got money in my pocket. But I never knew the love of Christ. And so I meet this judge, and she takes a liking to me. She sees something in me I don't see in myself. And she works with me. So she gives me an opportunity to go to treatment, which I've been there so many times before. And my problem is I don't like to listen. And so she keeps trying over and over again. I end up having to go back to prison because I just can't listen. I know what I need for me, and nobody loves me, and I didn't have the support that I needed growing up, and so I had this entitlement to being my own boss, but I was like a puppy that chased my tail around in a circle. I didn't know that I needed trauma counseling. I didn't know that I was trafficked until about a year and a half ago. I just thought it was something that happened to people like me. So she put me in prison. I got out of prison. I was sober for 18 months, but I was still hanging around with the wrong people, and I relapsed. And I remember going to see her because I heard she had cancer. And I remember what she told me that day. She said, you didn't get this way overnight, so you can't change overnight, and I'm going to love you until you can. And I'd like to say I got sober at that moment, but I didn't. I just fell further and deeper into my depression. And in 2011, I got rearrested. And I got rearrested on my daughter's birthday, which is January 26th of 2011 was my arrest date. And I started this journey. I was on Social Security. I was on food stamps. I had mental health issues. I've had many years of cutting myself and mental health issues and drug addiction. I would like to say that everything came smooth for me, but I'm a hard learner, and I like to test the waters. I watched the women around me. So I was introduced to Becky Moreland through Judge Unruh, who created Rahab Ministries in Akron, Ohio, at 450 Matthew Street. We have a drop-in. And I hung out there because I'm from New Orleans, Louisiana, so I literally have no family up there. And so I hung out there every day so that I could get a sense of peace, so that a place I could call home. And so I could learn how to dress and talk, because I didn't know how to dress, nor did I know how to talk to people. And they loved me as if I were family. And so through the years, I've had the opportunity of growing and changing and learning who God is in my life and knowing that He protects me through that stuff and that everybody has a choice. And I can either stay in that or I can grow out of it. And so I chose to grow out of it, and I am currently working in Canton, Ohio at Sandal Place with Rahab Ministries, and I work with women just like me. I'm her, she is me. There's nothing different about her that is not in me. I do not look at the women like they're worse off than I ever were. I was homeless for 20-something years. I've only rented 2 buildings in my whole life as an apartment or a house. And I never really had a good car. I didn't drive until I was 32 years old. I didn't get a driver's license until I was 32, or a real doctor. I always went to the emergency room. I do want to say this. I want to say that the women that you see on the corner are not there by choice. When I was a child, I wanted to be a veterinarian. When I went to the front of my class with a stuffed animal, but because of trauma, and because there wasn't somebody there to hold my hand and help me through what I went through a lifestyle of just getting high to stay out of my head. I got high to stay out of my head. I know that they say that prostitution still exists, but we're working on it so that it's not considered prostitution anymore. It is considered trafficking. Because nobody chooses to be a hopeless drug addict. Nobody chooses to be on the corner. Nobody chooses that, even if I collected my own money. And I'm gonna say that because when I was trafficked out here by two men, I learned that I could keep my own money and I was off and running. So I can continue to get high. So I didn't have to feel anything. I am going to be speaking at schools, helping younger girls, and that's my heart. My heart is to speak for those who are silenced. And also just a tidbit about social media. So, and pictures online. There's over, one of my sources say there's over 500,000 predators that view our pictures online a day. And the gaming industry, they're creating chat rooms to talk to your kids. Vulnerability is high. Anybody to pay attention. So we are social media branded these days. And look at me, look how pretty I look, you know? Or if you're too thick, you know, they make fun of you and bully you. So any man that approaches a kid or a teenager is going to have he's already got a foot in because they care about what people think about him, you know? And we are not their friends. I am not my child's friend. I can only be a parent to my child. I can't be their friend. I can't sit in the side room and smoke weed with them and kick it. I can't drink with them. I can't have them come drink to my house because I don't want them drinking at somebody else's house. They just can't drink, period. I don't have my kids with me, and I'm okay with that. But I'm working on getting the knowledge I need to help other parents and their children. Because I was trafficked by my classmate. I was trafficked by my boyfriend's parents. And we are still all kids to the age of 18. Anything under 18, if they are coerced, fraud, force, they're trafficked. 18, I would say 21, but you know, the teens and the children, thank you.
That was fantastic. Thank you so much for sharing your story. It takes a lot of courage and vulnerability to stand in front of people and share your story. And I'm sure it's difficult. And we appreciate you so much and your journey and where you are now. Lastly, I'd just like to open it up for questions for anyone that spoke. If you have anything that you'd like to comment, questions you'd like to ask, this would be an excellent time to do so. And then I also want to share what we have on the table over here. There is an activities calendar to commemorate Human Trafficking Awareness Month, and I bring that up, it's already the 19th, but I bring that up because each day of the month there is either a statistic, piece of information, a TED Talk, a resource. Every day is different, but there's a ton of information on this calendar, so feel free to take that. There's also a piece of information from our state legislature about protecting your kids online, which has come up numerous times from different speakers. So that's some good information. There's also a document that shares a list of books and movies that relate to this topic, as well as a number of questions that you can ask if you suspect someone is involved in this industry, and the ways, the verbiage around how to ask those questions in a safe way. And then there's also the top 10 things you can do to help fight human trafficking, as well as the nomoretrafficking.org newsletter that Rayetta mentioned, and also Rahab flyers. So lots of good stuff. I just wanted to share specifically what's there that you can grab on your way out. So at this point, I'd invite you again to have a snack, ask questions here, and then when we're finished with questions, if there's a question that you have personally that you just don't want to ask in front of the crowd, we'll just kind of hang out so that we can have one-on-one conversation with anyone that spoke. Does anyone have any questions?
Well, the documentaries that State Representative North, It was Yellow Rose, but I didn't get the other one.
Shadow on the Heartland.
What is it?
Shadow on the Heartland.
Thank you.
Shadow on the Heartland.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes.
What resources are available to help people coming out of trafficking?
I have some resources on the table right there.
Would you like to address that in general? Do you have anything else to add?
I have some documentation on the table for Rahab Ministries, and we also have a human trafficking number. I have to get that number, I apologize. But I can give you a card and then we can link up and we can figure that out together. I have the resources, I just don't have them with me. For that, I apologize. Like I said, I broke my glasses today.
The National Human Trafficking Hotline is a really good resource, and I think it's 888-373. I think it's 8888, but we'll get that number for you. So that's one resource. Also, in terms of finding information and statistics and numbers and all that kind of stuff, as well as resource information, the Polaris Project is the kind of gold standard in this country for human trafficking information. You might have noticed the logo on my slides, but it's thepolarisproject.org. And that is probably the very best place to get general information.
Oh, Lord, well, now it's working.
Now's the time.
Next question?
No. Anyone else? Yes.
So this is so much information and so, I'm 70, almost 71 years old. There's so many things, snapshots I've thought of through my life where I may have been seeing things that fit in this, and I feel a little guilty about it.
We don't know what we don't know, right? Hence the reason that we're all here.
Including, I'm pretty certain, beginning of a rape sequence in my dorm that I just didn't understand what I was seeing. I was totally clueless person. But also something that influenced my career choice and sticking with it was somebody I didn't know very well. Scratching on my door at 7 o'clock on a Saturday morning in my dorm was one of the women in the room next door who would terrify yourself by giving yourself cigarette burns. And to this day, she's a close friend, and I think I was helpful to her. But I also am pretty sure I never knew, there's probably a lot more story than I ever knew. And this is somebody in the dormitory that made knowledge it was not a trafficking question, but it very likely was much more of an in-house family, either violence or sexual, which is all the same thing.
It's a result of trauma.
Yeah, trauma that her parents were in the midst of a nasty divorce. And it's, I guess, I don't know how to answer it, but the question is, if you're just a human being out there in the world and you want to be supportive, how do you take being supportive of a person into something that's effectively going to another level of helping and maybe systemically helping?
I think it's a question of establishing rapport and the knowledge that you're a safe person, because so many times in situations of violence, people don't necessarily realize they're victims. We've heard that more than one time here. But even if someone does realize they're a victim, there's a lot at stake by disclosing. Part of that could be getting their abuser in trouble. And because of that Stockholm Syndrome scenario, that's a really scary proposition, because then as a victim, what happens next? Where do you live? Where do you go? Where's your security? Even if your security is not healthy, it's still security. So establishing yourself over time as a safe person for disclosure is probably the very, very best advice I could give, because asking someone directly probably isn't going to get you there. But that relationship over time is where that information comes out. You would agree with that?
Yes, a rapport, you have to go to rapport, we're not going to tell you right away.
Yeah, yeah. It's not gonna come quickly. Can you say that again?
I'm sorry, you have to build a rapport, relationship, because that's the one thing that when a lot of our women that we serve, they trust the person that they're with. That's all they have. So in order, and you can't force a question, you can't force them. So you have to build a relationship, a rapport, get them to earn your trust. Sometimes it can take months, but consistency matters, and don't try to be fake, because they can pull a fake from anywhere, you know, and they can see it, and they won't trust you, and if you break that trust, they won't never trust you again.
Anyone else? I'm just curious, if there are more questions, please ask. I'm just curious if anyone would like to share if there's been a specific takeaway, like a knock you in the head kind of takeaway from tonight, what that might be for you. If anyone would like to just comment.
I kind of want to comment, but not on the microphone.
We have a shy comment.
People are probably like, oh, I know who that is, my friend. I am part of the coalition and through Watch. I've worked at the Village Network 5 minutes down the road for 18 years. I get emotional. I'm a therapist, and I work with girls just like you, and I am inspired by you. And that's all I have to say, and that is my takeaway, and I will carry that on to those that I serve, those in my family, those in my peer group, and share your message, because it hits me like I started yesterday, and I didn't. So I thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you. That's beautiful. That's beautiful. Would anyone else like to share? I'm not going to put you on the spot. I just thought that that'd be a nice way to end, is with takeaways. So we'll close our program, and as I said, we've got a little bit of time to hang around. So if you want to have a private conversation with anyone, this would be the time to do it. So thank you so much for your attention and for seeing the importance in being here and learning more so we can all do better. Thank you.